The crack of a Remington rifle splits the silence of the Montana wilderness. A brass shell casing catches the light of the rising moon as it falls to the snow-crusted ground. In the distance, a masked rider topples from his horse, his plan to cut the fence line of the Evergreen Ranch ending with a single, perfect shot from over 300 yards away. The remaining rustlers scatter like spooked deer, unaware that the shooter tracking their retreat through her scope isn't the aging sheriff they've bribed or the cowardly deputy they've threatened, but Abigail Blackwood herself, the very widow whose cattle they've come to steal. The winter wind howls across the vast Montana territory, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of more snow. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Abigail lowers her rifle with practiced ease, her breath forming clouds in the frigid night air. Her gloved hand reaches for the polished horn whistle hanging at her neck. 3 short blasts pierce the darkness, and from different positions around the sprawling ranch, lanterns flicker in response, her signal acknowledged. From her position atop the ridge overlooking the northern pasture, Abigail watches as 5 riders emerge from different hiding spots along the property line. Each moves with the unmistakable confidence of men who faced danger and survived. Not ordinary ranch hands, but hardened men with histories written in gunpowder and blood. They converge on the fallen rustler, who clutches his shoulder and curses as he's hauled to his feet. What Gabriel Stone and his infamous Ghost Riders don't realize as they regroup miles away, nursing wounded pride and plotting revenge, is that Abigail Blackwood is nothing like the helpless widow they expect. And the Evergreen Ranch isn't defended by frightened cowboys. It's become home to the deadliest collection of lawmen and gunfighters the Montana Territory has ever seen. Dawn breaks over the Evergreen Ranch, painting the snow-covered landscape. In hues of pink and gold, the sprawling property sits nestled in a valley near Silver Creek, Montana Territory, its boundaries marked by towering pines and rugged mountains that disappear into the clouds. Smoke rises from the stone chimney of the main house, carrying the scent of coffee and frying bacon into the crisp morning air. Inside, Abigail Blackwood moves with quiet efficiency around her kitchen, her tall, slender figure belying a strength that has carried her through 2 years of widowhood in one of the most unforgiving places on earth. At 35, her face still holds the beauty that once made her the most sought-after woman in Boston society, though time and hardship have etched fine lines around her grey-blue eyes. Her chestnut hair, touched with a few strands of early silver at the temples, is pulled back in a practical braid as she prepares breakfast for a household that operates with the precision of a military camp. The large farmhouse kitchen, with its well-worn table and sturdy chairs, serves as the command center of the operation. Maps of the ranch property and surrounding territory hang on one wall, marked with notations about cattle movements, water sources, and possible weak points in their defenses. On another wall hangs her husband's portrait, Colonel James Blackwood, in his Union Army uniform, his expression stern but for the hint of warmth in his eyes, reserved only for her. Beside it hangs his U.S. Marshal's badge, preserved in a hand-carved wooden frame. What visitors to the Evergreen Ranch never notice is the hidden room behind the pantry, concealed by a sliding panel activated by turning a particular canned good on the shelf. Inside that room rests 12 badges, marshal, sheriff, and deputy stars from territories across the West, along with detailed dossiers on every known outlaw operating within 500 miles. The wooden chest beneath these carefully organized records holds something even more unusual, a leather-bound journal filled with elegant handwriting that doesn't belong to the late colonel. In it, Abigail has meticulously documented every cattle theft, stage robbery, and act of violence committed by the Ghost Riders over the past 18 months, complete with witness accounts, tracking information, and a web of connections that reveal patterns invisible to less disciplined minds. Abigail pours herself a cup of coffee and moves to the wide front porch despite the cold, wrapping a thick woolen shawl around her shoulders. The evergreen ranch spreads before her. 3,000 acres of prime grazing land, 2 mountain lakes, and the finest Hereford breeding stock west of the Mississippi. A kingdom that dozens of men have tried to wrest from her since James's death, first through unwanted marriage proposals, then through legal challenges, and now through outright theft and intimidation. Her gaze sweeps across the property with practiced assessment. In the distance, she can make out Isaiah Ward tending the horses, the former Texas Ranger's distinctive silhouette unmistakable even at this distance. Beyond him, she knows that Caleb Reeves and Nathan Brooks are checking the north fence line, while Samuel Hawkins and Joseph Martinez are likely already moving the herd to the sheltered valley ahead of the storm brewing on the horizon. Her 5 ranch hands, each man having exchanged star and gun for saddle and rope at her request after James was laid to rest. To the neighboring ranches and the townsfolk of Silver Creek, they're just loyal hands who stayed on to help the widow maintain her husband's legacy. None suspect that these men represent over 40 years of combined law enforcement experience, or that their loyalty stems from blood oaths sworn to their former commander and debts that can never be repaid. "Mornin', Mrs. Blackwood," comes a gravelly voice as Benjamin Porter, the ranch cook and the only employee not formally affiliated with a badge, emerges from the cookhouse with a tray of fresh biscuits. The elderly man had ridden with James during the war before a rebel bullet rendered his right leg nearly useless, his gnarled hands moving with surprising dexterity despite years of hard living. "Boys'll be hungry when they get in from patrol," he continues, setting the tray on the small table beside her. "As always, Benjamin." Abigail smiles, her voice gentle despite the steel that runs beneath it. "Isaiah spotted rustlers near the ridge. Line again last night." Benjamin nods, understanding the unspoken information. "Heard the Remington around midnight. Reckon that's one less thief to worry about." Abigail's ability with a rifle is a subject of quiet speculation throughout the county, though most attribute it to her husband's patient instruction rather than recognizing her natural talent. Few know that during their 10 years of marriage, it was often Abigail who outshot her husband during their private competitions, her eye keener and her hands steadier than even the legendary marshals. "Mr. Martinez mentioned tracks yesterday," she says, sipping her coffee. "Not just rustlers, specifically ghost riders, 7 of them skirting our eastern boundary." Benjamin's weathered face hardens. "Stone's gang? They're getting bold." "They're getting desperate," Abigail replies, her tone measured though her eyes sharpen with calculation. The railroad's pushing deeper into the territory, laws following close behind. Their days of operating freely are numbered. According to the latest reports from Helena, the Ghost Riders, led by the notorious Gabriel Stone, have been terrorizing ranches across the Montana Territory for the past 3 years. Their pattern is ruthlessly efficient: isolate remote ranches, steal their cattle, burn out any resistance, and disappear into the wilderness. 9 ranchers have died trying to protect their property. 14 widows have been forced to sell their land for pennies after the gang destroyed everything they had. What the Ghost Riders don't realize is that Abigail Blackwood has been tracking their movements since the day they murdered a young family. 2 properties over, plotting their patterns in her journal with the methodical precision of a military strategist. Each attack, each sighting, each rumor carefully noted and analyzed, not out of fear, but in preparation. "Might be time to send word to Judge Parker," Benjamin suggests, though his tone indicates little faith in territorial justice. Abigail's smile doesn't reach her eyes. "I suspect the judge is already aware, Benjamin. The question is whether he intends to do anything about it." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The complicated relationship between the Evergreen Ranch and Silver Creek's law enforcement is a delicate balance Abigail navigates with careful diplomacy. Sheriff Wilson resents the presence of former lawmen on her property, viewing them as a challenge to his authority. His young deputy, Thomas Reynolds, harbors an obvious admiration for the widow that makes his visits to the ranch both frequent and transparent. Either way, she continues, we'll manage our own affairs as always. Benjamin nods, understanding the weight behind her simple statement. The Evergreen Ranch has stood self-sufficient since its founding, even more so since the Colonel's passing. While neighboring ranches hire temporary hands during calving or branding season, Abigail maintains her small, permanent crew, men whose loyalty and capabilities far exceed those of typical ranch hands. The thunder of approaching hooves draws their attention as Isaiah Ward rides toward the house, his Appaloosa moving at an urgent pace that immediately puts Abigail on alert. Ward is the most senior of her former lawmen, a man who served as her husband's right hand for over a decade. His weathered face rarely registers alarm, which makes his current expression all the more concerning. Mrs. Blackwood, he calls as he dismounts in a fluid motion that belies his 50 years. Riders coming in from the West Ridge, 10 of them at least, flying Stone's colors. Abigail sets down her coffee cup, her movements unhurried despite the news. Stone himself. Can't confirm, but they match the description. They're making no attempt to hide their approach. Ward's hand rests casually on his holstered Colt, habit from his ranger days. Reeves and Brooks are bringing the North herd in closer to the home pasture. Abigail nods, assessing options with quick efficiency. And Hawkins and Martinez? I sent Martinez to circle behind our visitors, keeping to the tree line. Hawkins is positioned at the west overlook with the Sharps rifle. The mention of the Sharps, a powerful long-distance rifle capable of stopping a man at over 800 yards, registers in Abigail's expression. Samuel Hawkins had been the most accomplished marksman in the Arizona Territory before a knife wound to his right hand ended his career as a sheriff. His shooting ability, however, remains undiminished. Very good, she acknowledges, turning to Benjamin. Mr. Porter, perhaps you should see to preparations in the root cellar, just in case our visitors aren't simply passing through. The older man understands the directive, moving toward the storage shed where emergency supplies are maintained. It's a precaution they've taken before, not out of fear, but strategic prudence. Abigail returns to the house with measured steps, disappearing into her bedroom, where she retrieves a small key from a locket around her neck. The locked cabinet yields its secrets as she selects a Smith & Wesson revolver, checking its mechanism before securing it in a specially designed pocket sewn into her skirt. From another drawer, she removes her leather-bound journal, quickly noting the date, time, and number of approaching riders. When she emerges onto the porch once more, her demeanor shows no trace of concern. Instead, she presents the picture of a rancher's widow preparing to receive unexpected guests, her shawl adjusted neatly around her shoulders, her hair tidy, nothing in her manner suggesting anything but polite curiosity. Only Isaiah Ward, watching from his position near the corral, recognizes the subtle indicators of her readiness, the slight adjustment in her posture, the way her right hand remains near her hidden weapon, the careful positioning that gives her clear sightlines in multiple directions. The approaching riders crest the final rise, their silhouettes dark against the morning sky. They advance in a loose formation that suggests organization without military discipline. At their center rides a broad-shouldered man whose bearing marks him as their leader, his black duster and distinctive red bandana, visible even at this distance. Gabriel Stone, Ward murmurs, confirming Abigail's suspicion. The notorious outlaw has finally turned his attention to the Evergreen Ranch, unaware that Abigail Blackwood has been anticipating this moment for months. Unknown to Stone, he isn't approaching a vulnerable widow's struggling ranch, but riding directly into the carefully laid plans of a woman who has transformed grief into purpose, and 5 former lawmen whose sense of justice burns as fiercely as it did when they wore a star. As the riders draw closer, Abigail's hand brushes the locket she wears around her neck. Inside rests a small photograph of James and a lock of his dark hair. Her thumb traces the engraved surface, a ritual that centers her before confrontation. We spent countless hours researching and crafting this story. If you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our channel. It truly means the world to us. Now let's continue our tale of justice in the Montana wilderness. "Let's welcome our visitors, Mr. Ward," she says calmly, her voice carrying no trace of the calculation happening behind her composed features, "and ensure they understand the hospitality of the Evergreen Ranch." Ward's weathered face reveals a hint of a smile as he positions himself at the foot of the porch steps, his stance casual yet strategic. In the distance, dust rises from the east pasture as Caleb Reeves and Nathan Brooks drive the valuable cattle closer to the protection of the main ranch buildings. From his elevated position on the west ridge, Samuel Hawkins adjusts his rifle, calculating wind and distance with the precision that once made him legendary among lawmen. And somewhere behind the approaching riders, Joseph Martinez, who earned the name Shadow during his years hunting fugitives along the Mexican border, circles silently through the tree line, creating a net that is slowly closing around men who believe they're approaching easy prey. Gabriel Stone and his Ghost Riders have successfully terrorized 3 territories, leaving destruction and grief in their wake. They've faced sheriffs, posses, and desperate ranchers, always emerging victorious through superior numbers and ruthless violence. But they have never encountered an operation like the Evergreen Ranch. They have never faced Abigail Blackwood. The widow stands on her porch, outwardly serene, as the approaching thunder of hooves grows louder. The morning sun catches the silver strands in her chestnut hair, creating a momentary halo effect that would seem almost prophetic to a superstitious mind. For a brief moment, the shadow she casts against the whitewashed wall seems to take on a different shape, not that of a rancher's widow, but of something altogether more formidable. The Ghost Riders have made a fatal miscalculation. They've found the widow they've been seeking, a wealthy, seemingly vulnerable target whose prosperity has drawn their predatory attention. But they have no idea that the quiet woman watching their approach isn't merely James Blackwood's grieving widow. She is Abigail Blackwood, the strategic mind behind some of her husband's most successful manhunts, the woman whose shooting ability became legend among the select few who witnessed it, and the architect of a ranch that operates with military precision beneath its peaceful exterior. As Gabriel Stone's gang approaches, the trap Abigail has been methodically preparing for months begins to close around them. A trap designed not just to protect her land, but to deliver a justice that has been 2 years in the making. Silver Creek sits nestled between snow-capped mountains 40 miles south of the Evergreen Ranch, a cluster of wooden buildings straddling the banks of its namesake waterway. The town has grown steadily in the 5 years since the discovery of silver in the nearby hills, transforming from a dusty trading post to a bustling settlement with aspirations of permanence despite the harsh Montana winters. Main Street boasts the essential establishments of frontier civilization: the Silver Creek Hotel with its attached dining room, Wilson's General Store, the First Bank of Silver Creek, Sheriff Wilson's office and jailhouse, Doc Morrison's medical practice, and the Broken Spur Saloon. A small white church marks the town's eastern edge, while the promise of a railroad spur, steel rails creeping closer with each passing month, fuels speculation and land deals on its western boundary. In this growing community, Abigail Blackwood is known primarily as Colonel Blackwood's widow, a designation that both respects and diminishes her. To the townsfolk, she exists more as an extension of her late husband's reputation than as a woman in her own right. View connect the reserved, well-spoken woman who visits town once a month for supplies with the exceptionally capable rancher who has not only maintained but expanded the Evergreens operations since James's death. "Did you hear?" Margaret Wilson whispers to Eleanor Morrison as she wraps parcels behind the general store counter. Abigail Blackwood purchased the water rights to Carson's Creek last month. That's another 1,500 acres, effectively under her control. Eleanor, the doctor's wife and Silver Creek's most reliable source of information, leans closer. Harold, Carson swore he'd never sell those rights, especially not to the Evergreen. Said he'd die with that land in his family. Must have offered him a small fortune, Margaret suggests, her eyebrows raised in speculation. Though I wonder where a widow finds such funds. 2 years since the Colonel's passing, and not a sign of financial strain. Or perhaps, Eleanor adds with a meaningful look, there are other arrangements. A woman alone running that massive operation, with those particular men working for her. This conversation, with minor variations, has recurred throughout Silver Creek since Colonel Blackwood was laid to rest 2 years prior. The collective imagination of the town cannot reconcile Abigail's success with their understanding of womanhood. Explanations range from the practical, she must be secretly bankrupting the ranch, to the scandalous, surely improper relationships with her ranch hands explain their loyalty. None consider the simpler truth that Abigail Blackwood possesses a natural aptitude for ranching and business that equals or surpasses most men in the territory. Few know that she kept the books and managed correspondence for 3 successful businesses back in Boston before marrying James, or that her father, a prominent judge, had educated his daughter in matters of law, finance, and strategy long before. Such education was fashionable for women. Sheriff Emmett Wilson emerges from his office squinting against the midday sun. At 48, Wilson has served as Silver Creek's primary lawman for 7 years, his authority previously unchallenged, until Colonel Blackwood settled his collection of former lawmen at the Evergreen. Though the colonel never interfered in town matters, his mere presence and the caliber of men who followed him created an implicit comparison that Wilson has never quite forgiven. "Morning, Sheriff," calls young Peter Flynn, who works as a clerk at the bank. "Any word on the Ghost Riders?" "Heard. They hit the Donovan place up north last week." As Reynolds approaches, he registers the unnatural stillness surrounding the property. No hands visible near the outbuildings, no smoke from the bunkhouse chimney, no cattle in the near pastures. Experience sends warning signals through his body, and instinctively moving to his holstered Colt. "That's far enough, Deputy." The voice emerges from a stand of pines to his left. Reynolds reins in sharply, squinting to identify Isaiah Ward, partially concealed among the trees, rifle held at casual. "Readiness." "Mr. Ward," Reynolds acknowledges with relief. "I've come with news about the Ghost Riders." "They're already here," Ward finishes for him. "Mrs. Blackwood is entertaining them." Reynolds' blood runs cold at this casual announcement. "She's... what?" "Stone's a murderer with a $2,000 bounty on his head." Ward's weathered face reveals nothing. Mrs. Blackwood understands the situation perfectly. She asked that any visitors be directed to the main house. The deputy processes this information with growing alarm. Abigail Blackwood alone in her home with Gabriel Stone and his cutthroats. His hand tightens on his weapon. "I should follow Mrs. Blackwood's instructions." Ward interrupts firmly. "She specifically mentioned you might call today. Said to assure you everything is proceeding according to expectations. Something in Ward's tone, a certainty beneath the deference, gives Reynolds pause. He studies the former ranger more carefully, noting details that his concern initially obscured. Ward stands relaxed yet alert, his position offering clear sightlines to both the road and main house. More significantly, a thin wire runs from near his boot along the ground toward the ranch buildings, a communication line of some kind. Where are the others? Reynolds asks carefully. Ward's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Attending to their duties, Deputy. Ranch work doesn't stop for visitors. Reynolds has spent enough time around lawmen to recognize the deliberate vagueness in this answer. Something is happening at the Evergreen, something coordinated and intentional. He recalls conversations with Abigail during his previous visits, her occasional questions about Stone's operations that he had attributed to natural concern. This isn't a surprise to her, he realizes aloud. She's been expecting them. Ward neither confirms nor denies this assessment. Mrs. Blackwood suggested you might wish to observe from the East Ridge. Caleb Reeves is positioned there and can brief you on developments. The invitation, phrased as a casual suggestion, carries an unmistakable purpose. Reynolds hesitates only briefly before nodding his acceptance. Whatever Abigail Blackwood has planned, she's offering him a controlled opportunity to witness it, an opportunity that might advance his understanding of both the widow and the criminal operation threatening the region. Following Ward's directions, Reynolds rides toward a wooded ridge overlooking the ranch complex. As he approaches, Caleb Reeves materializes from what appeared to be empty landscape, his ability to blend with the terrain a stark reminder of his reputation for tracking fugitives across impossible terrain during his years wearing a badge. "Afternoon, Deputy," Reeves greets him, gesturing toward a position that offers excellent visibility of the main house and surrounding area while maintaining concealment. "Mrs. Blackwood thought you might arrive today." Reynolds dismounts, securing his horse, before joining Reeves at his observation post. From this vantage point, the ranch spreads below them in remarkable detail. He can see Gabriel Stone and 5 of his men on the front porch of the main house, their horses tethered to the railing. Abigail stands in the doorway, her posture relaxed, as she appears to converse with the notorious outlaw. "What's happening?" Reynolds demands, unable to reconcile the peaceful tableau with Stone's violent reputation. Reeves passes him a brass spyglass. "Negotiation. Stone wants her cattle, offering to let her keep the ranch if she cooperates." Through the glass, Reynolds observes the scene with greater clarity. Abigail's expression remains pleasant, showing no sign of fear as she faces men responsible for multiple murders. Stone gestures expansively, his manner suggesting reasonable discussion rather than outright threat. Where are his other men? He never rides with fewer than 12. 3, watching the eastern pasture where he believes our main herd is grazing. Reeves replies matter-of-factly. 4 circled behind the property to cut off potential escape routes. The precision of this information startles Reynolds. "How do you know that?" Reeves's smile carries grim satisfaction. "Because Martinez is shadowing them, and Brooks has been tracking their movements since they crossed our boundary 2 hours ago." Reynolds lowers the spyglass, studying Reeves with new understanding. The Evergreen Ranch isn't responding to a crisis. They're executing a predetermined plan. Abigail Mitchell hasn't been caught unprepared by Stone's arrival. Somehow she anticipated it. She knew they were coming, he states, no longer a question. Reeves nods once. "Mrs. Blackwood has been tracking Stone's operations for months. Pattern analysis suggested we were next on his list after the Donovan place. We've been preparing accordingly." 5 against 15 aren't favorable odds, Reynolds observes, professional assessment overriding his personal concern. Reeves's expression, hints at amusement. Depends on the five, Deputy. Colonel Blackwood selected his men carefully. More importantly, he married a woman whose strategic mind rivals any military commander I've served under. This casual revelation forces Reynolds to reconsider everything he thought he knew about Abigail Blackwood. The quiet, composed widow who politely receives his monthly visits while discussing cattle prices and weather patterns suddenly emerges as something far more complex, a tactician deliberately positioning her resources against a known threat. What's her plan? He asks, professional curiosity now fully engaged. Reeves turns his attention back to the scene below. Phase 1 is currently underway. Allow Stone to believe his approach has succeeded. Let him think 5 hands and a widow present minimal resistance. And Phase 2, the former lawman checks his timepiece with deliberate precision, should begin approximately 20 minutes from now, when Stone discovers the cattle in the east pasture aren't what he came for. Below them, Abigail Blackwood continues her conversation with Gabriel Stone, her hand gesturing toward the eastern horizon where dust rises from what appears to be a substantial cattle herd. Even through the spyglass, Reynolds can't detect any indication that she's facing the man responsible for terrorizing 3 territories. She maintains the poise of a hostess, addressing unexpected but not unwelcome guests. What Gabriel Stone doesn't realize, what Reynolds himself is only beginning to understand, is that Abigail Blackwood isn't merely enduring this confrontation. She has orchestrated it, turning her ranch into an elaborate stage where Stone believes himself the predator while actually playing the role she has designed for him. Watch carefully, Deputy, Reeves advises, checking his rifle with practiced efficiency. You're about to witness why Colonel Blackwood always said his wife was the finest strategic mind in the territory. The main house of the Evergreen Ranch presents a study in calculated duality. Its public spaces, the formal parlor, dining room, and Colonel Blackwood's study, maintain the expected appearance of a successful rancher's home. Tasteful furnishings, family photographs, and military mementos create an environment that visitors find both impressive and predictable. What no visitor has ever seen, what Gabriel Stone cannot possibly suspect as he sits across from Abigail Blackwood in her sunlit parlor, is the hidden operations center concealed behind the library's sliding bookcase. 2 hours before Stone's arrival, Abigail had stood in this secret room, reviewing a detailed map of her property with her 5 former lawmen, the space illuminated by carefully positioned oil lamps. This concealed chamber contained the true nerve center of the Evergreen's defense system: topographical maps, communication equipment, weapons racks, and a chart tracking known outlaw movements across 3 territories. They'll come from the west, she had stated with quiet certainty, her finger tracing the likely approach. Stone favors midday arrivals, psychological advantage of making a show of force in broad daylight. Isaiah Ward, 13 years her husband's senior deputy, had nodded in agreement. Consistent with his previous patterns, reconnaissance suggests 15 men total, likely split into 3 groups. Abigail had moved to another map showing cattle distribution across her property. Our prime breeding stock is secure in the hidden valley beyond Thunder Ridge. What Stone will see in the east pasture is the Carson herd, older cattle we purchased last month as visible bait. Samuel Hawkins, whose damaged hand had ended his career as a sheriff, but not his effectiveness with a rifle, had studied the terrain markings with a sniper's calculating eye. The ridge positions give us coverage of all approaches. If they follow expected patterns, they'll split their forces. Here, here, and here. His finger had landed precisely on the map locations where the ranch's carefully concealed defensive positions waited. The room had fallen silent as Abigail walked to the weapons cabinet, removing a custom Smith & Wesson revolver with ivory grips. A wedding gift from her husband, who had recognized her natural marksmanship from their first meeting. She had checked the action with practiced ease before securing it in the specialized pocket sewn into her skirt. "Gentlemen," she had said, her voice steady with the calm authority that had earned their loyalty long before James's death, "we've prepared for this day for 18 months, since these men murdered the Peterson family and stole their herd while the territorial authorities looked the other way. Today, the Ghost Riders learn the consequence of believing a woman alone must be defenseless." Now, as afternoon sun streams through the parlor windows, Abigail maintains perfect composure while serving coffee to Gabriel Stone and his lieutenant Frank Donner. Her dark blue dress reveals nothing of the custom holster at her thigh or the derringer secured at her wrist. Her gentle smile betrays none of the tactical calculations happening behind her eyes. "I appreciate your directness, Mr. Stone," she says, pouring coffee with steady hands. "So few people are forthright about their intentions these days." Gabriel Stone, the ghost to newspaper accounts but never to his face, studies Abigail with undisguised assessment. At 42, Stone presents a contradiction. His appearance suggests respectability, well-trimmed beard, quality clothing, articulate speech, while his eyes reveal the predatory calculation that has left 27 people dead across his criminal career. "Direct's always best with business propositions, Mrs. Blackwood," he replies, accepting the offered cup with a nod that mimics gentlemanly courtesy. "Your herd's respected across the territory. Prime breeding stock is worth considerably more than standard trail cattle. You flatter me, Mr. Stone." Abigail seats herself across from him, arranging her skirts with practiced grace, "though I suspect your interest extends beyond mere admiration of my husbandry methods." Frank Donner shifts uncomfortably at this directness, but Stone's smile widens with something approaching genuine appreciation. Unlike his victims in previous raids, the Blackwood widow shows neither fear nor hysteria, qualities that had always irritated him when conducting business. "Here's my proposition," Stone continues. "My associates and I will drive your herd to the markets in Denver. Your cut would be 15% of the sale price, delivered to you personally upon our return." "How generous," Abigail responds, her tone revealing. Nothing, the threat remains unspoken, but hangs in the air between them. Stone's pattern is well established. Cooperation brings survival with minimal bloodshed. Resistance ensures destruction of property and loss of life. "I'd hate to see this beautiful operation damaged by poor decision-making," Stone offers smoothly. "Ranch is dangerous work. Accidents happen, buildings burn. Running it with just 5 hands seems precarious." Abigail sips her coffee, appearing to consider his words. Through the window behind Stone, she registers the nearly imperceptible movement of Nathan Brooks positioning himself near the barn, exactly according to the timetable they established during morning preparations. "Colonel Blackwood always said timing was everything," she remarks conversationally, "in battle and in ranching." Something in her tone causes Stone to study her more carefully. For the first time, he notices details previously overlooked. The precision with which she positioned herself in the room, offering him the seat with his back to the window. The unusual quality of her posture, relaxed yet balanced, similar to gunfighters he's encountered. The careful arrangement that keeps her right hand free despite the coffee cup in her left. "Your husband had quite the reputation," Stone acknowledges, setting aside his untouched coffee. "The Rangers still tell stories about his manhunts. James believed in preparation," Abigail responds, "especially when facing adversaries who underestimate you." The atmosphere in the parlor shifts subtly as Stone recognizes the implied meaning behind her pleasant tone. Before he can respond, pounding footsteps on the porch announce the arrival of one of his men, Luke Miller, a young outlaw whose primary value lies in his speed on horseback. "Boss," Miller blurts, forgetting protocol in his urgency. "There's something wrong with the herd. They're all old steers and culls, not a single breeding bull or prime heifer among them." Stone's expression hardens as he turns back to Abigail, reassessing the composed woman before him. Care to explain, Mrs. Blackwood? Abigail's smile remains unchanged. As I mentioned, Mr. Stone, preparation. The cattle you see are indeed mine, purchased from the Carson Ranch last month. My primary herd, the stock you're actually seeking, is quite secure. For the first time, uncertainty crosses Stone's face. The raid that had succeeded 12 times across 2 territories suddenly deviates from expected patterns. The vulnerable widow has anticipated his approach, rearranged her assets, and now sits calmly acknowledging her counter-move. "Where are my men who were watching the north boundary?" he demands, hand moving toward his holstered revolver. "Enjoying the hospitality of my root cellar," Abigail replies, her pleasant tone unchanged, despite the tension crackling through the room. "Mr. Martinez has an exceptional gift for approaching undetected. Your men never heard him coming." Outside, a single gunshot echoes from the direction of the east pasture, a signal rather than an attack. Abigail registers it with the barest flicker of her eyes, noting the precise timing that confirms her ranch hands are executing their assigned responsibilities perfectly. Stone rises abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, woman. I've burned out a dozen ranches for less insolence." Abigail remains seated, her posture unchanged, despite the clear threat looming over her. "On the contrary, Mr. Stone, I know precisely who I'm addressing. Gabriel Thomas Stone, formerly of the Colorado Volunteers, discharged in '71 for theft and suspected murder of a fellow soldier. 6 feet tall, scar across your left cheek from a knife fight in Cheyenne, distinctive tattoo of a skull on your right forearm from your time in a California prison." The outlaw stares at her, genuine shock replacing his anger momentarily. "How could you possibly—" "The territorial marshals maintain excellent records," Abigail interrupts smoothly. "My husband's former colleagues have been tracking your movements since the Peterson murders. Every raid, every campsite, every man who rides with you, documented, analyzed, and prepared for." Through the window, Abigail notices Samuel Hawkins, moving into position behind the woodshed right on schedule. The choreography she designed months ago unfolds with military precision, each of her men reaching their assigned positions exactly when predicted. "Killer," Stone orders his lieutenant. "Get the others. We're burning this place to the ground." He draws his revolver, aiming directly at Abigail. "Starting with this interfering widow." Abigail's expression shows no fear as she gazes up at the gun pointed at her heart. "2 problems with your plan, Mr. Stone. First, your others are currently being disarmed by my very capable ranch hands." Her right hand moves with startling speed, producing her Smith & Wesson from its hidden holster. "And second, you seem to have mistaken preparation for interference." The outlaw's eyes widen at the revolver now aimed steadily at his midsection, not brandished in panic, but held with the unwavering confidence of someone intimate with its use. More disconcerting than the weapon is Abigail's expression. Calm, focused, almost professionally detached. Frank Donner draws his own weapon, creating a tense standoff in the formerly peaceful parlor. "Boss, something ain't right," he begins nervously. "The whole setup stinks of a trap," finishes Isaiah Ward from the doorway behind them, his shotgun trained on Donner. "Carefully planned and 6 months in execution. I'd advise reconsidering. Your current course of action, gentlemen?" The tableau freezes. Stone aiming at Abigail, Abigail aiming at Stone, Donner targeting Ward, and Ward's shotgun promising devastating consequences at close range. Young Miller raises his hands slowly, recognizing the hopelessness of their position. "You're making a grave mistake," Stone growls, though uncertainty has replaced confidence in his tone. "I have men all over your property." "Had," Abigail corrects gently. "Past tense is important in tactical discussions, Mr. Stone," as if summoned. By her words, the sound of multiple gunshots echoes from the direction of the east pasture. Controlled, disciplined fire rather than chaotic exchange. Professional implementation rather than desperate defense. Your men attempted to steal my cattle despite discovering they weren't what you expected, Abigail explains, her aim never wavering. My ranch hands objected to this theft. The resulting discussion is what you're hearing. Stone's expression cycles through disbelief, rage, and finally grim recognition. Those aren't ordinary ranch hands. No, Abigail acknowledges. They're former lawmen who served under my husband. Men who gave their word to protect this land and its owner after James was killed. Men who've been anticipating your arrival for quite some time. Outside, hoofbeats approach the house at a controlled gallop. Through techniques of breath control her husband had taught her during their early courtship, Abigail maintains her steady aim despite the adrenaline now coursing through her system. James had recognized her natural talent immediately, spending countless hours refining her already impressive skills. You think your 5X lawman can stand against my entire crew? Stone challenges, though his confident tone rings hollow. Abigail's smile carries genuine amusement for the first time. Mathematics was never your strength, was it, Mr. Stone? 5 former lawmen plus 1 widow equals 6. Your crew numbered 15 this morning. 3 are secured in my root cellar. 2 more are currently under Mr. Hawkins's supervision by the East Ridge. I believe the gunfire we're hearing suggests further reduction in your operational numbers. The approaching rider reaches the front of the house, dismounting with practiced efficiency. Heavy footsteps cross the porch, and Nathan Brooks appears in the doorway beside Ward. Blood splattered across his shirt, but his expression professionally composed. "Ma'am?" He addresses Abigail while keeping his rifle trained on the outlaws. 4 of Stone's men attempted to run the Carson herd toward the north boundary. Reeves and Martinez intercepted them. 2 surrendered when they recognized the situation. The others... He pauses, his meaning clear without requiring explicit detail. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks," Abigail acknowledges with a slight nod. "Casualties. On our side..." Martinez took a bullet across his shoulder. "Nothing serious, otherwise we're intact." Gabriel Stone stares at the former marshal with undisguised hatred. "Brooks, I've heard of you. They call you the Hunter along the border." Former Marshal Nathan Brooks, Abigail confirms, who tracked the Cassidy brothers through a blizzard for 9 days before bringing them to justice. One of the finest manhunters in territorial history. The outlaw's gun hand trembles slightly, not from fear, but frustrated rage, as he recognizes the extent of the trap he's ridden into. What appeared to be a vulnerable ranch, operated by an overmatched widow, has revealed itself as a precision operation staffed by elite lawmen. "Your reputation claimed you were smart, Mr. Stone," Abigail continues, her voice carrying the calm authority that had guided manhunts when her husband was in the field. "I'm offering you an opportunity to demonstrate that intelligence. Surrender peacefully, and I guarantee safe passage to Silver Creek, where the circuit judge arrives in 3 days. Resist, and this ends differently." From his observation point, on the East Ridge, Deputy Reynolds watches the scene unfold through Reeves's spyglass with dawning comprehension. What appeared to be Abigail Blackwood entertaining dangerous visitors now reveals itself as a carefully orchestrated confrontation. Through the windows of the main house, he can see Abigail holding Gabriel Stone at gunpoint, while Ward and Brooks cover his lieutenants. "She planned this entire operation," Reynolds murmurs, professional admiration overriding his concern. Positioned decoy cattle, set up defensive positions, anticipated their every move. Caleb Reeves, who has rejoined the deputy after completing his assignment at the North Pasture, nods with evident pride. Mrs. Blackwood has been preparing for Stone since she tracked his pattern emerging 18 months ago. The colonel taught her strategic planning during their marriage, though truth be told, she had a natural gift that sometimes surpassed his. Reynolds lowers the spyglass, processing this revelation about the woman he thought he knew. The quiet, composed widow, who discusses weather patterns and cattle breeding during his monthly visits, suddenly emerges as a tactical commander, orchestrating a complex operation against the territory's most dangerous outlaw. She's been analyzing his previous raids, Reeves continues, checking his rifle methodically, identifying patterns, predicting movements, calculating response options. That journal she keeps in the colonel's study, full of intelligence reports and tactical assessments that would impress any army officer. Before Reynolds can respond, movement along the western boundary catches Reeves's attention. 3 riders approach at high speed, Stone's reinforcements arriving too late to affect the outcome at the main house, but potentially dangerous nonetheless. Nonetheless, we have company, Reeves observes calmly, raising his rifle to his shoulder with practiced ease. Mrs. Blackwood anticipated this possibility as well. Would you care to assist in the interception, Deputy? Taylor draws his revolver, professional responsibility overshadowing his astonishment at the day's revelations. Lead the way, Mr. Reeves. As they move toward predetermined defensive positions, Reynolds glances back at the main house, where Abigail Blackwood continues holding Gabriel Stone at gunpoint, her posture revealing not the frightened victim the outlaw expected, but a composed tactician who has controlled every aspect of this confrontation from the beginning. Inside the parlor, tension stretches between Stone and Abigail like a drawn bowstring. The outlaw's options dwindle with each passing moment as gunfire from the property boundaries confirms the systematic dismantling of his operation. You've been hunting me for 18 months, he realizes aloud, reassessing the woman before him with newfound respect tinged with bitterness. Using lawman's resources, tracking my movements, analyzing my patterns. Abigail adjusts her grip on the Smith & Wesson, the ivory handles catching afternoon light. You mistake personal vengeance for professional responsibility, Mr. Stone, though I won't deny satisfaction in seeing justice finally reach you. Justice? Stone spits the word. Rich widow playing lawman because her husband wore a badge. Something changes in Abigail's expression, a momentary flash of genuine emotion breaking through her composed exterior. My interest in your capture began precisely 2 years ago when you murdered Thomas and Martha Peterson. She leans forward slightly, her aim unwavering. Do you remember them, Mr. Stone? The small ranch near Whispering Pines. Thomas tried surrendering. His herd peacefully, Martha begged for her husband's life. Understanding dawns in Stone's eyes. The school teacher, Abigail confirms, her voice steady despite the painful memory. The one who taught alongside me in Boston before her marriage, my dearest friend since childhood. The woman who convinced me to journey west, who comforted me through the loneliness of my first frontier winter, who wrote faithfully every month until your bullet ended her life. For the first time, Gabriel Stone fully comprehends his tactical error. The Evergreen Ranch wasn't targeted by coincidence or mere opportunity. Abigail Blackwood hadn't recognized his pattern by chance. She had studied him with the dedicated persistence of someone fulfilling a personal vow. The territorial marshal couldn't establish sufficient evidence for your prosecution, Abigail continues. Witnesses disappeared, tracks went cold, but I made a promise at Martha's grave that someday you would face justice for what you did to her family. Through the window, Abigail notices Samuel Hawkins signaling from his position near the barn. Confirmation that the remaining outlaws have been subdued. The operation she designed over months of careful planning has concluded successfully, exactly as predicted during their morning briefing. It's finished, Mr. Stone, she states with quiet finality. Your men have been captured or neutralized. The circuit judge arrives in 3 days in Silver Creek. Justice delayed, but not denied. Frank Donner, recognizing the hopelessness of their situation, slowly lowers his weapon. "Boss, she's outplayed us. No shame in admitting when you're beat." For a moment, Abigail believes Stone might surrender. His expression suggests grudging recognition of her superior strategy. Then something shifts in his eyes. A reckless determination that James had warned her represented the most dangerous moment when confronting desperate men. "Not quite finished," Stone snarls, his finger tightening on the trigger. Abigail's response comes from thousands of hours of practice, movements drilled until they became instinct rather than conscious decision. She fires a fraction of a second before Stone, her bullet striking with precision while his goes wide, embedding in the wall behind her as he crumples to the floor. In the sudden silence following the gunshots, Abigail remains perfectly still, her revolver unwavering despite the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the parlor. Isaiah Ward moves swiftly to secure Donner and Miller, while Nathan Brooks checks the fallen outlaw with professional efficiency. "Clean shot," he confirms, glancing up at Abigail with professional respect. The colonel would be proud. Abigail finally lowers her weapon, the culmination of 2 years' preparation resolving in a single moment of necessary action. "See to our wounded, Mr. Brooks. Deputy Reynolds will need a complete accounting for the circuit judge." As her ranch hands secure the remaining outlaws, Abigail moves to the window, gazing across the property that has been both her sanctuary and operational base since James's death. The Evergreen Ranch stands intact, her cattle secure, her defenses proven, her promise to Martha fulfilled. Gabriel Stone made the fatal error that has doomed countless opponents throughout history. He underestimated his adversary based on appearance rather than capability. He saw a vulnerable widow managing an operation beyond her capacity, never suspecting he faced a strategist who had anticipated his every move months in advance. Outside, as afternoon light casts long shadows across the ranch yard, Deputy Reynolds approaches the main house with Reeves beside him. The young lawman's expression reveals the profound reassessment occurring within. Abigail Blackwood, emerging not merely as an object of admiration, but as a commander whose tactical brilliance had dismantled the territory's most dangerous outlaw gang in a single, precisely orchestrated operation. What Reynolds and indeed all of Silver Creek will soon discover is that the widow Blackwood has only begun to reveal her true capabilities that will transform not just her ranch, but the entire territory in ways none could anticipate. Deputy Thomas Reynolds had witnessed violence before, inevitable encounters during 3 years wearing a badge in frontier territory, but nothing in his experience prepared him for the methodical efficiency with which Abigail Blackwood's operation neutralized the Ghost Riders. 15 hardened outlaws, systematically disarmed, captured or eliminated in less than 3 hours. As dusk approaches the Evergreen, Reynolds assists Caleb Reeves in securing the surviving gang members in the ranch's storage barn. The converted space serves as a temporary prison, its sturdy construction and limited access points making it ideal for holding prisoners until transport to Silver Creek can be arranged. 9 captured, 5 dead, 1 escaped, Reeves summarizes clinically, checking the bindings on Frank Donner's wrists. "Better results than we anticipated." Reynolds studies the former lawman with newfound appreciation. Earlier today, he had seen Reeves as simply an aging ranch hand, competent but unremarkable. Now, observing his professional handling of dangerous prisoners, the deputy recognizes the decades of law enforcement experience underlying every movement. "You've been planning this for months," Reynolds states, no longer a question. Reeves secures the barn door, positioning Joseph Martinez as sentry despite his bandaged shoulder, with a clear view of both the entrance and surrounding approaches. Mrs. Blackwood began tracking Stone's operations after the Peterson murders. The colonel's connections provided initial intelligence. After his passing, she maintained those information networks personally. Reynolds follows Reeves toward the main house, struggling to reconcile this revelation with his previous understanding of Abigail Blackwood. Why didn't she involve the sheriff's office? This is precisely why we have law enforcement. The older man's expression communicates volumes without words. Skepticism regarding local law enforcement's effectiveness against an operation of Stone's scale, and something more personal that Reynolds can't immediately identify. Instead of answering directly, Reeves gestures toward the house. Mrs. Blackwood requested your presence in the Colonel's study once the prisoners were secured. She'll address your questions herself. The main house appears remarkably undisturbed considering the day's events. Only a single bullet hole in the parlor wall and bloodstains on the hand-woven carpet testify to the violence that transpired hours earlier. Abigail has changed from her blue dress into practical riding clothes. Divided skirt, white blouse, and leather vest. She stands beside the Colonel's desk, reviewing documents with Samuel Hawkins, whose rifle rests within easy reach despite the apparent security of their current situation. Deputy Reynolds, she greets him without looking up, her tone businesslike rather than maintaining the gentle courtesy that typically characterized their interactions. Thank you for your assistance today. Your presence provided a visual witness to these proceedings. Reynolds removes his hat, suddenly uncertain of protocol. Is she the rancher's widow he's come to admire, or the tactical commander who orchestrated today's operation? Ma'am, I have questions about why we didn't involve Sheriff Wilson. Abigail completes his thought, finally meeting his gaze directly. Her eyes, always intelligent, now reveal a clarity of purpose and analytical depth he'd previously glimpsed only in fragments. Please join me. This conversation requires privacy. She leads him into the Colonel's study, a room Reynolds has seen during previous visits but never entered. Leather-bound books line walnut shelves, military maps decorate the walls, and a massive oak desk dominates the space. Abigail activates a hidden mechanism, revealing the concealed operations room that served as command center for today's events. Welcome to the real Evergreen Ranch, Deputy Reynolds. The hidden room stands in stark contrast to the traditional ranch house surrounding it. Maps cover the walls, marked with notations tracking criminal movements across 4 territories. A telegraph apparatus sits in one corner, connected to a line that must run underground to avoid detection. Most revealing is the collection of dossiers stacked neatly on a central table. Intelligence files that would impress any marshal's office. James established this room during construction, Abigail explains, lighting additional lamps to illuminate the space. He believed effective law enforcement required both official channels and alternative resources, particularly in territories where jurisdiction is complicated by distance and limited manpower. Reynolds studies the room with professional assessment, recognizing the strategic thinking behind its design and location. This goes beyond standard ranch security. Because the Evergreen was never merely a cattle operation, Abigail responds, retrieving a leather portfolio from a locked cabinet. While James wore the marshal's badge officially, our partnership extended to all aspects of his work. She opens the portfolio, revealing an array of documents bearing official seals alongside handwritten field reports. The Peterson murders weren't random banditry. They represented a pattern of targeted operations against specific ranches. Operations, too organized to be explained by ordinary criminal opportunity. Reynolds examines the materials, his law enforcement training allowing him to recognize the professional intelligence gathering they represent. Witness statements, transaction records, movement patterns, all compiled with methodical precision. Martha, Peterson wasn't just my friend, Abigail continues, her composure momentarily wavering at the name. She was our informant regarding cattle thefts along the northern routes. Her husband's ranch served as a monitoring station for cross-border movements. This revelation forces Reynolds to re-evaluate everything he thought he understood about the situation. They were working with the marshals, with James specifically, unofficial auxiliaries like dozens of others across the territory. Abigail confirms. James recognized early in his career that effective intelligence required civilian cooperation, particularly from those whose ordinary appearances allowed them to observe without attracting attention. She retrieves a faded photograph from the desk, a younger Abigail standing beside Martha Peterson, both dressed as schoolteachers, their expressions containing the confidence of women comfortable with their capabilities. Before my marriage, I taught alongside Martha in Boston. My father was a federal judge. He ensured his daughters received education uncommon for women, including matters typically reserved for men. The photograph reveals a different Abigail than the composed ranch owner Reynolds has come to know. Younger, certainly, but the difference extends beyond age. This younger woman's eyes hold a spark of challenge and ambition untempered by the grief that would later touch her. When I met James during a visit to my brother's ranch, he recognized capabilities beyond my teaching position. We married within 4 months. What began as professional appreciation evolved into partnership, then love. He found in me not just a wife, but a strategic counterpart, someone who could analyze intelligence, recognize patterns, and coordinate operations while he maintained official duties. She moves to the map wall, indicating territory markings that Reynolds now recognizes as operational boundaries. For 10 years, we worked together, James in the field with his deputies, me coordinating intelligence networks from this room. Most of his most successful manhunts originated with analyses I provided. Reynolds absorbs this information. Fragments of conversations suddenly acquiring new meaning, the occasional references to Abigail's good instincts from townspeople who witnessed her business decisions. The respect bordering on deference that former lawmen showed her, attributed to courtesy toward their commander's widow, rather than recognition of her own capabilities. The Peterson murders changed everything, Abigail continues, her voice maintaining professional detachment despite the personal connection, not just because Martha was my friend, but because their deaths represented a fundamental failure of official law enforcement. Despite clear evidence connecting Stone to multiple crimes, jurisdictional complications prevented effective pursuit. She unlocks another cabinet, revealing files clearly labeled with Gabriel Stone's name, intelligence gathering spanning 2 years and hundreds of pages. After James died, I continued our work independently. The men you know as my ranch hands remained with me not just from loyalty to their former commander, but because our operation serves a purpose beyond cattle raising. The Evergreen is a marshal's outpost, Reynolds realizes aloud, pieces falling into place with startling clarity. Unofficially, yes, Abigail acknowledges. We monitor criminal movements across the territory, coordinate with similar operations in strategic locations, and occasionally, as today demonstrated, implement direct action when official channels prove insufficient. Reynolds processes this revelation with growing understanding of Abigail's true role in regional security, not simply a widow maintaining her husband's ranch, but the intelligence center for a network spanning hundreds of miles, operated by a woman whose capabilities equal or exceed many badge-wearing lawmen. Why reveal this to me now? He asks finally. Abigail studies him with evaluating intensity, weighing precisely how much additional information to share. Because Sheriff Wilson will arrive tomorrow, expecting a simple narrative about self-defense against cattle thieves. Instead, he'll find an operation that challenges everything he believes about proper authority and jurisdiction, particularly when orchestrated by a woman. Her directness catches Reynolds off guard. though he recognizes the truth in her assessment. Wilson's resentment toward the evergreen has always extended beyond professional concern into personal territory, particularly regarding Abigail's independence from his authority. "You need an ally within official law enforcement," he concludes. "I need someone who understands the reality of our work rather than its appearance," Abigail corrects. "Someone who recognizes that effective justice sometimes requires unconventional approaches." Before Reynolds can respond, Joseph Martinez appears at the doorway, his wounded shoulder bandaged, but his alertness undiminished. "Ma'am, riders approaching." "In from town, Sheriff Wilson with 4 deputies. Abigail exchanges a meaningful glance with Reynolds. Earlier than expected, the official response begins. She activates the hidden mechanism, returning the study to its ordinary appearance with practiced efficiency. Within moments, no evidence remains of the Strategic Operations Center that conducted today's precision takedown of the Ghost Riders. "Decision. Time, Deputy," she says quietly. "Will your report reflect what you believe happened here, or what you now know to be true?" Reynolds recognizes the implied question beneath her words. His account will significantly influence how today's events are interpreted: straightforward ranch defense or coordinated operation beyond civilian authority. His response will define his position not just regarding the evergreen, but within the evolving landscape of frontier justice. Outside, as evening shadows lengthen across the ranch yard, Sheriff Emmett Wilson approaches with an expression that suggests he anticipates confrontation rather than cooperation. The 9 captured members of the Ghost Riders have been secured in the converted barn. The 5 casualties laid respectfully in the tool shed despite their crimes. Evidence has been methodically documented, weapons catalogued, and statements recorded. With precision that would impress any courtroom, Abigail Blackwood stands on her porch, transformed once more into the composed widow who greets visitors with appropriate hospitality. Only the subtle positioning of her former lawman around the property suggests anything beyond ordinary ranch operations. Reynolds takes his place beside her, his decision made, though its implications remain to be determined. The complexities of frontier justice cannot be resolved in simple terms of official versus unofficial authority, a reality he has always recognized intellectually but now confronts directly. Sheriff Wilson reins in before the main house, his assessment taking in the orderly scene with evident surprise. He had clearly anticipated chaos rather than the controlled aftermath of professional law enforcement action. "Mrs. Blackwood," he calls, not dismounting, a subtle assertion of authority through elevated position. "We received reports of gunfire. Deputy Reynolds appears to have forgotten his jurisdiction extends to town limits, not private property." Abigail's expression reveals nothing of the strategic commander who orchestrated today's operation. She presents instead the respectful civility expected of a prominent rancher addressing local law enforcement. "Sheriff Wilson," she acknowledges, "how fortunate you've arrived. Deputy Reynolds has been essential in helping us manage a rather significant incident. The Ghost Riders attempted to steal my cattle this afternoon." Wilson's expression shifts, professional interest overriding personal animosity. "Gabriel Stone, here, currently in my storage barn, along with 8 of his men," Abigail confirms, with remarkable composure for someone describing the capture of the territory's most notorious outlaw. "The appropriate paperwork has been prepared for a transfer to your custody." The sheriff studies her with undisguised skepticism. "You expect me to believe you and your 5 ranch hands captured Gabriel Stone and half his gang without assistance?" Before Abigail can respond, Reynolds steps forward, his decision crystallizing into action. "Sheriff, I was present for the entire operation. Mrs. Blackwood and her employees acted entirely within the law to defend their property against armed intruders. Their response was measured, proportional, and professionally executed. His careful wording, particularly operation rather than incident, communicates volumes to Abigail while maintaining plausible deniability with Wilson. Reynolds has made his choice, recognizing that justice sometimes requires flexibility regarding procedural expectations. Wilson dismounts slowly, his expression revealing the calculation happening behind his initial disbelief. Gabriel Stone carries a substantial bounty. Credit for his capture would significantly enhance any lawman's reputation. The precise details of how that capture occurred might prove less important than the result. "I'll need detailed statements," he declares, professional responsibility asserting itself despite his complicated feelings toward the evergreen. "Circuit judge arrives in 3 days. These men need proper processing." Abigail nods agreement. "My ranch hands have prepared complete documentation, including witness statements and inventory of recovered stolen property." Deputy Reynolds supervised the process to ensure proper procedure was followed. This fabrication, Reynolds' supervision, rather than Abigail's command, offers the sheriff the official framework he requires while protecting the truth of the operation's nature. Reynolds recognizes the elegant solution she presents, results delivered within acceptable narrative boundaries. As Wilson and his deputies move toward the storage barn to inspect the prisoners, Abigail catches Reynolds' eye with a glance that communicates both approval and invitation. Their conversation regarding the true nature of the Evergreen Ranch operation will continue, a conversation that might eventually extend beyond today's events to future cooperation. Inside the main house, Isaiah Ward retrieves a bottle of Kentucky bourbon from the Colonel's private reserve, a tradition following successful operations. The former lawmen gather in the kitchen while Abigail prepares to manage Sheriff Wilson's official response, each man understanding his role in the carefully coordinated dance between appearance and reality. "Deputy made his choice," Ward observes, pouring measures into 5 glasses. Question is whether he fully understands what that choice means. Samuel Hawkins, his rifle cleaned and returned to its proper place, accepts his glass with a thoughtful expression. He's smart enough to recognize good strategy when he sees it. Whether he's prepared for partnership is another question. Nathan Brooks, blood still staining his shirt sleeves despite attempts to clean them, raises his glass in silent toast to their success. Mrs. Blackwood will make the right assessment. She hasn't misjudged character yet. The men drink in unified acknowledgement of this truth. Their loyalty to Abigail extends beyond obligation to their former commander's widow. They follow her because experience has proven her tactical judgment equals or surpasses most officers they served under during their law enforcement careers. In the ranch yard, Abigail walks alongside Sheriff Wilson as he inspects the secured outlaws, answering his questions with the perfect balance of helpful cooperation and appropriate deference to his authority. Her performance, presenting as the fortunate survivor of criminal attack rather than the architect of a precision operation, represents years of practice in navigating societal expectations. Only Deputy Reynolds, observing from a respectful distance, recognizes the careful calculation behind her seemingly artless responses. The veil has been lifted from his perception of Abigail Blackwood, revealing the strategic intelligence that operates beneath her composed exterior. As darkness settles over the Evergreen Ranch, preparations begin for transporting the prisoners to Silver Creek. The journey presents both logistical and security challenges, 15 miles with dangerous. Men requires meticulous planning. 2 wagons, 4 prisoners per wagon, Abigail directs, marking positions on a hand-drawn map spread across the dining table. Armed guards front and rear, outriders maintaining perimeter surveillance. Sheriff Wilson listens with poorly concealed impatience. Though he officially commands this prisoner transfer, Abigail's detailed security recommendations consistently anticipate his concerns before he expresses them, a dynamic that increasingly tests his professional composure. "Mrs. Blackwood," he interrupts, "I appreciate your input, but my deputies have handled prisoner transports before." Abigail glances up from her map, her expression revealing nothing of the tactical commander who orchestrated the day's operation. "Of course, Sheriff. I'm simply sharing observations based on the Ghost Rider's previous behaviors. Their remaining associate may attempt rescue during transport." A commotion outside draws their attention, hoofbeats approaching at urgent pace, followed by voices raised in challenge as the deputies confront an unexpected arrival. "That would be Marshal Collins," Abigail observes calmly, checking her timepiece. "Right on schedule." Wilson turns to her with undisguised surprise. "U.S. Marshal? I received no notification of federal involvement." Abigail offers a measured smile that reveals nothing of her advanced knowledge. The Ghost Riders crossed territorial boundaries during their operations. Federal interest seems natural given the circumstances. Before Wilson can respond, Nathan Brooks enters the dining room. "Marshal Collins requests permission to enter, ma'am. Your deputies attempted to deny access, but he presented federal credentials." "Please show him in, Mr. Brooks," Abigail responds, setting aside her maps with unhurried precision. The arrival of Federal Marshal Richard Collins transforms the dining room dynamics instantly. Tall and weathered with the unmistakable bearing of a career lawman, Collins commands attention without conscious effort. His appearance, trail-worn clothing beneath an official badge rather than the formal attire some federal representatives favor, speaks to practical experience rather than bureaucratic authority. "Mrs. Blackwood," he greets her with respectful familiarity that suggests previous acquaintance. "Sheriff Wilson, deputy." His acknowledgement of each person establishes both courtesy and hierarchical awareness. Wilson straightens defensively, territorial instincts engaged by this federal intrusion. "Marshal Collins, this is unexpected. Local jurisdiction has the Stone situation well in hand." Collins accepts coffee from Brooks before addressing Wilson directly. "Gabriel Stone's operations cross 4 territorial boundaries, Sheriff. His activities fall squarely within federal purview. I've been tracking him for 16 months. The revelation of this extended investigation generates visible tension in Wilson, who clearly resents being positioned as a latecomer to law enforcement efforts against the notorious outlaw. Curious timing, your arrival immediately following his capture. Collins exchanges a brief glance with Abigail, a moment of silent communication that Reynolds notes with interest. "I received intelligence regarding Stone's movements toward this region approximately 2 weeks ago. Been working my way north since then." The specific time frame corresponds precisely with when Abigail began positioning her decoy cattle in the east pasture. Preparation that Reynolds now recognizes represented coordination with federal authorities, rather than merely local defensive measures. "Marshal Collins and my late husband worked several cases together," Abigail offers, providing contextual explanation that maintains plausible separation between her operation and federal involvement. "James always spoke highly of your investigative thoroughness, Marshal." Collins accepts this opening with professional smoothness. "Colonel Blackwood was the finest lawman I collaborated with during my career. His methodical approach to complex investigations set standards few could match. The strategic redirection succeeds in shifting focus from questions about Collins' timing to respectful acknowledgement of the late colonel's reputation. Neutral territory that allows Wilson to retreat from confrontational posturing without losing face. The Marshal's arrival actually simplifies our transportation concerns," Abigail continues, returning to immediate logistics. "Federal authority eliminates jurisdictional complications during prisoner transfer." This practical observation, framing federal involvement as beneficial rather than intrusive, offers Wilson graceful exit from potential territorial dispute. Though his expression suggests continued reservation, professional pragmatism gradually overcomes personal pride. Joint operation would be appropriate given the circumstances. He concedes with minimal enthusiasm. My office maintains primary jurisdiction regarding crimes committed within county boundaries, while federal authority addresses cross-territorial aspects. Collins accepts this arrangement with professional courtesy that conceals whatever private assessment he might hold regarding local law enforcement capabilities. Agreed, Sheriff. Cooperation serves justice most effectively in complex cases. With this tentative alliance established, the conversation turns to immediate prisoner transport preparations. Throughout this discussion, Abigail contributes strategic recommendations while maintaining the appearance of civilian deference to official authority, a performance whose subtlety Reynolds increasingly appreciates. When Wilson and Collins depart to inspect the secured prisoners, Abigail remains in the dining room, her posture relaxing almost imperceptibly as the official representatives exit. Reynolds, having remained silent throughout the exchange, finally voices the question their interaction has raised. "You and Marshal Collins have worked together before," he observes quietly. "Not just through the colonel." Abigail studies him, with evaluating intensity before responding. Richard Collins represents the evolution of federal law enforcement, Deputy Reynolds. He recognizes that effective justice requires networks beyond official boundaries, including civilian intelligence, sources traditionally overlooked by conventional authorities. This measured confirmation of Reynolds' suspicion reveals both trust in his discretion and invitation to deeper understanding of her operations' connections. The Evergreen Ranch functions not in isolation, but as a component of coordinated efforts, spanning multiple jurisdictions and authoritative structures. He knew about Stone's planned approach, Reynolds continues, assembling pieces with increasing clarity. Your preparations weren't merely defensive, but coordinated with federal strategy. Abigail neither confirms nor denies this assessment directly. Instead, she responds with a question that extends beyond immediate circumstances to fundamental philosophy. What defines justice in territories where official authority remains limited by geography, resources, and occasionally competence, Deputy? Is it adherence to procedural expectations regardless of outcomes, or achievement of just results through whatever methods circumstances require? The question articulates the essential tension Reynolds has confronted since discovering the true nature of Abigail's operation, the space between official authority and effective justice that frontier conditions create and maintain. Before he can formulate a response, Caleb Reeves appears at the dining room door, his perpetual vigilance evident despite the apparent security established by official law enforcement presence. Riders approaching. From town, ma'am, appears to be Harold Jenkins with several companions. Abigail's expression shifts subtly, calculation replacing philosophical inquiry. The banker arrives earlier than expected. Interesting timing considering today's events. What business would the bank have regarding the Stone situation? Reynolds asks. Perhaps none directly, Abigail responds, moving to the window with unhurried purpose. Though Mr. Jenkins has demonstrated consistent interest in the Evergreens operations, particularly our financial vulnerabilities. Through the dining room window, she observes 4 riders approaching the main house. Jenkins in his characteristic black coat, accompanied by Edward Clayton, the cattle buyer, and 2 men whose appearances suggest hired guns rather than banking associates. Mr. Reeves, she directs calmly, please inform Sheriff Wilson and Marshal Collins that we have additional visitors requiring attention. Then position yourself at the west approach with appropriate equipment. Mr. Brooks will coordinate perimeter security. The precision of these instructions and the immediate, unquestioning response they generate reminds Reynolds forcefully that Abigail Blackwood commands her operation with authority earned through demonstrated strategic capability rather than merely inherited position. You suspect Jenkins has connection to Stone's activities, he realizes, professional assessment overriding surprise. Not direct criminal collaboration, Abigail clarifies, checking her timepiece with calculated precision. Rather opportunistic exploitation of circumstances created by others. Jenkins has attempted purchasing the evergreen 5 times since James's death, each offer following misfortunes affecting neighboring properties. She retrieves a small notebook from her skirt pocket, its ordinary appearance concealing the detailed intelligence it contains. 3 ranches bordering our western boundary have suffered cattle thefts over 14 months. Each incident reduced property values temporarily, creating financial distress that preceded acquisition attempts by banking interests. Reynolds processes this information with growing understanding of regional dynamics beyond individual criminal activities. You believe he's exploiting Stone's operations to force property sales. Exploitation rather than coordination, Abigail confirms. Jenkins consistently positions his bank to benefit from security disruptions, whether created by outlaws, weather events, or market fluctuations. His arrival now suggests an intention to leverage today's events somehow. She returns the notebook to her pocket, smoothing her riding skirt with composed deliberation. "Shall we greet our visitors, Deputy? Your official presence provides useful witness to whatever proposition Mr. Jenkins intends presenting." Outside, Harold Jenkins dismounts with practiced precision that suggests familiarity with horses maintained despite his primarily urban profession. His expression communicates concerned professionalism, though Reynolds, newly attuned to performance aspects of such encounters, notes calculation beneath this benevolent facade. "Mrs. Blackwood," Jenkins calls, removing his hat with courteous flourish. "News of today's troubles reached town this afternoon. I came immediately to offer whatever assistance the bank might provide during this difficult time." Abigail descends the porch steps with gracious composure, presenting the very image of grateful refinement. "How thoughtful, Mr. Jenkins. Though I'm pleased to report the troubles resolved quite satisfactorily. Sheriff Wilson and Marshal Collins are currently preparing to transport the surviving Ghost Riders to Silver Creek for trial." This information visibly disrupts whatever narrative Jenkins had prepared. His momentary hesitation, barely perceptible, but telling, suggests expectations of finding the evergreen in distress rather than triumph. "Marshal Collins?" he inquires, professional smoothness recovering quickly. "Federal authorities are involved. Gabriel Stone's activities extend beyond local jurisdiction," Abigail explains, with appropriate deference to official processes. "The marshal arrived this afternoon to coordinate prisoner transfer." Jenkins absorbs this information with evident recalculation of his approach. The presence of federal authority introduces complications beyond anticipated local dynamics. Nevertheless, he continues, such violent incidents often create unforeseen financial pressures. Replacement of damaged property, interrupted business operations, security enhancements. The First Bank of Silver Creek stands ready to extend favorable credit terms should circumstances require temporary financing. The offer, ostensibly generous, carries undercurrents that Reynolds now recognizes as predatory rather than supportive. Jenkins appears to be positioning his bank to capitalize on vulnerability rather than genuinely assist recovery. "How considerate," Abigail responds with perfect poise. "Fortunately, the Evergreen suffered minimal property damage during today's unfortunate incident. Our operations continue without interruption, and our security protocols proved remarkably effective." She gestures toward the ranch yard, where normal activities proceed with conspicuous efficiency. Hands moving between tasks, repairs underway on minor damage to the corral fencing. The scene presents irrefutable evidence of operational stability rather than vulnerability. Jenkins studies this activity with poorly concealed disappointment before introducing his companion. Edward Clayton has authorized me to convey a revised acquisition offer regarding your breeding stock. Recent regional instability has adjusted market valuations, but his principals remain interested at appropriate figures. The transparent attempt to leverage perceived vulnerability into advantageous purchase terms might have succeeded with many ranch operations following violent confrontation. Against Abigail Blackwood's preparation and strategic foresight, it appears almost comically inadequate. Mr. Clayton and I have previously discussed potential transactions, Abigail acknowledges with professional courtesy. However, the Evergreens breeding program continues advancing precisely as planned. Today's events have, if anything, enhanced our regional security position rather than diminished it. 1 year after the capture of the Ghost Riders, Deputy Thomas Reynolds, now wearing the Silver Star of Silver Creek's sheriff, rides across the rolling hills toward the Evergreen Ranch. The landscape has transformed since that pivotal confrontation. Telegraph poles now trace the main road, and construction crews can be spotted in the distance as the promised railroad finally pushes into the territory. The railway follows a route noticeably different from the one originally planned by Eastern investors. Instead of cutting through prime ranch land that would have required forced sales and property devaluations, it follows natural terrain that preserves existing operations while still connecting vital communities. As Reynolds approaches the Evergreens main gate, he reflects on the extraordinary events that followed the Ghost Riders' capture. Harold Jenkins resigned his position at the First Bank of Silver Creek a month after the confrontation, departing hastily for Denver amid rumors of financial improprieties. The federal investigation that followed revealed patterns of loan manipulation, designed to force property sales along planned railroad routes, evidence Marshall Collins had been assembling for years. Edward Clayton's Eastern investors withdrew their cattle purchasing operations from the territory entirely when documents seized from Jenkins' office exposed their connection to land speculation schemes that bordered on criminal conspiracy. The subsequent reorganization of the First Bank under new management has transformed lending practices throughout the region, with particular attention to supporting small ranchers during difficult seasons. The Evergreen Ranch itself has evolved visibly. New outbuildings stand alongside the original structures, and the ranch hands have increased from 5 to 12. Though Reynolds knows the original 5 former lawmen still maintain their special status and responsibilities, the property serves openly now as a regional security coordination point, its strategic purpose acknowledged by territorial authorities, who recognize the effectiveness of Abigail Blackwood's operation. Abigail awaits him on the porch, her appearance reflecting subtle changes that mirror her operation's evolution. She no longer maintains the facade of the simple widow. Her clothing combines practical frontier utility with the unmistakable authority of someone comfortable commanding resources. At her side sits a ledger containing reports from 5 regional stations, the visible network that grew from her hidden operation. "Sheriff Reynolds," she greets him, respect evident in her use of his earned title. "Right on schedule." Reynolds dismounts, removing his hat with the courtesy that remains unchanged despite his professional advancement. "Mrs. Blackwood, the territorial governor's representative arrived in Silver Creek last night. He's eager to finalize arrangements regarding the Regional Security Commission." Abigail nods, unsurprised by information her network likely reported hours before Reynolds' official notification. "The legislature finally recognized what we've demonstrated for years. Effective security requires both official authority and practical implementation. They move inside to the former colonel's study, now openly serving as operational headquarters rather than maintaining the pretense of simple ranch management. Maps still line the walls, but they now bear official territorial seals alongside Abigail's precise notations. The bookcase no longer conceals the planning room. The sliding panel remains permanently open, revealing communication equipment and intelligence files organized with military efficiency. Isaiah Ward awaits them, his weathered features unchanged, though his position has evolved significantly. He now wears a badge bearing the words Territorial Security Service, the newly formed agency that emerged from the chaos following Jenkins' departure and the exposure of corruption extending into multiple county governments. Reports from all stations confirm quiet conditions across the region, Ward informs them, maintaining the professional precision that characterized his lawman service. The Mitchell gang attempted crossing near Thunder Pass, but the Ranger Company intercepted them before they reached settled territory. Abigail receives this information with the calm assessment that Reynolds has come to recognize as her natural operational mode. Implementation progress regarding the new communication protocols. 6 county sheriffs have integrated the systems, Ward confirms. 3 more are scheduled for completion next month. The governor's representative brings authorization for the remaining installations. This systematic expansion of security infrastructure represents the practical application of lessons learned during the Stone confrontation and subsequent investigations. Abigail's network, once hidden by necessity, now forms the backbone of regional coordination between previously isolated law enforcement jurisdictions. The commission appointment makes it official, Reynolds notes, removing documents from his saddlebag. Territorial Security Director with authority spanning 5 counties and direct reporting to the governor's office. Abigail accepts the papers without examining them immediately. After years operating without official sanction, formal recognition holds less significance than the practical effectiveness her network has already demonstrated. Authority follows capability rather than preceding it, she observes, a philosophy developed through experience rather than theoretical governance. The evolution from widowed rancher to recognized security director occurred not through political ambition but practical necessity. Abigail Blackwood's capabilities, first demonstrated during the Ghost Riders confrontation, provided an implementation model for regional security that territorial authorities eventually acknowledged they could neither replicate nor replace. There's something else, Reynolds continues, producing a personal letter bearing the territorial governor's seal. Colonel Blackwood's service record has been officially amended. His final report regarding the Peterson investigation has been entered into Marshal Archives with full acknowledgement of your contributions to the intelligence gathering and analysis. This posthumous recognition of James Blackwood's work, and more significantly, Abigail's previously unacknowledged partnership in that work, represents personal vindication beyond professional advancement. Martha Peterson's death has finally received appropriate acknowledgement in official records, her role as intelligence source documented rather than concealed. As afternoon light streams through the study windows, Abigail rises from the colonel's desk, now properly hers in both practical usage and official capacity. Her movement toward the window presents visual testament to the region's transformation. Where once she watched for approaching threats with tactical assessment, she now surveys coordinated development she helped secure through systematic security implementation. We've created something important, she observes, her perspective extending beyond immediate circumstances to historical significance. Not merely capturing outlaws, but establishing systems that address vulnerabilities, enabling criminal exploitation. Reynolds joins her at the window, his perspective similarly expanded. Through partnership in her operation's evolution, Systems that acknowledge capability rather than convention. Recognition that justice requires both official authority and practical implementation. Outside, riders approach. The first class of recruits for the Territorial Security Service arriving for training under Ward's experienced supervision. Men and, remarkably, 2 women, selected not for political connections but demonstrated capabilities, each recommended by local authorities who recognized potential beyond conventional qualifications. The beginning of something that extends beyond individual efforts, Abigail notes, satisfaction evident in her usually composed expression. Systems that continue regardless of specific personnel. This perspective, creating enduring structures, rather than dependent operations, represents her most significant contribution to regional security development. Beyond capturing outlaws or exposing corruption, Abigail Blackwood established a framework addressing frontier challenges through coordinated capabilities rather than isolated authorities. As Reynolds prepares to return to Silver Creek, he exchanges a final nod with the woman whose strategic brilliance transformed both regional security implementation and his own professional understanding. The Evergreen Ranch stands as physical representation of this transformation, cattle operation providing economic foundation for a security coordination center that extends influence across 5 counties. The widow who once concealed tactical brilliance beneath social expectations now openly employs those capabilities through official position earned by demonstrated effectiveness rather than political accommodation. The systems she established will secure communities long after individual outlaws like Gabriel Stone fade from regional memory, enduring legacy of capability recognized despite convention and effectiveness prioritized above appearance. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.